if you're understanding what Todd just said and really the power of it, I mean, this man made 110 calls. I'm just looking at your email, Todd. So at that point, it was 51 quality conversations. Sounds like that went up.
51. Well, it went up because of the people who called me back yesterday, right? So I had more than a dozen people call me back yesterday. And so, again, it still gives me 50 people who I didn't talk to that I'm going to call next Monday. And transparently, I'll invite you guys all. I mean, you're part of the community if you want to jump on and be on Zoom. So here's what I asked people to do. I asked people to be committed to at least 50 calls, because I think that no matter how much business you do, whether it's a little or a lot, and I know you're all rock stars because you're on this call, I know you have at least 50 realtors that you can call, whether you find them on Facebook, whether you find them in your phone, whether you find them in your CRM, or whether they're agents that you know as friends. I mean, 50 agents. So I would encourage you to call. And I was kind of, whale hunting, right? I mean, some of them were what I would call your average normal real estate agent. But I was whale hunting, right? So one of the people that's going to do HOA.com with my team, I've known him for more than a decade. We met like 12 plus years ago, but we didn't know each other. I did have him on my podcast in 2019, 3 years ago, and I've never talked to him since, right? So I'm like, all right, that's really poor example, Todd. Yes, it is. Haven't talked to him since then. But I called him, he picked up the phone, it was a left or 5 hour time, and he's super relational. And he wanted to have a conversation, but I had him on my podcast. He's an ex-pro ball player, owns part of a Keller Williams franchise, runs a big team, asked me about my family, asked about his, because he's super relational. And then he started telling me, I said, well, how's business? He started telling me about it. And I know he works a particular community in Arizona. And he told me how he's digging in with his team, how he hasn't done any team training in years, but he's training them twice a week. And so I said, gosh, I'm happy to help if I can. And I said, well, tell me about your community. And I said, well, have you done any hyper local social farming? And he said, well, what do you mean, Todd? And so long story short, here's a guy who's worked with the same lenders forever. He's got 2 or 3 that are, paying money to be in his Keller Williams office, but he picked out his favorite HOA in the little city that he farms. And I've got a follow-up meeting now with him that'll probably overflow to meet with his team so that I can onboard him for HOA.com, and we'll carve out that business for him to work with our team. And so that was just one example, but there was lots of examples of that kind of conversation of taking someone who I would have said is unrecruitable to work with. And HOA.com was the easy button. It was just zero hesitation. And then so I'm just really excited for the follow-up. And I didn't sit there and sell them on it any further or tell them what the plan is. I said, awesome. And then next is I'll set up the follow-up meeting. So I'll meet with them between now and Christmas, and then I'll set something up with him, absolutely, to get in front of his team. And so that way I'll have opportunity for my team to connect with him.
That's awesome. So guys, there's so many golden nuggets that you just shared there, Todd. Number one, you are whale hunting, as you put it, right? I think of an elephant, whale, whatever it is for you. But the fact that you're able to do that and really reach out to the top producers in the industry, out of the top 10 real estate agents or teams in Phoenix, it sounds like you reached out to at least 2 of them and they said yes to moving forward. Is that right?
Yeah, I think if I look at the total, I think it's 4 people who own part of a real estate franchise. A couple of them are, KW owners, and then, half a dozen big team leaders. And so, for me, I just wanted to play with it, right? I wanted to play with it. So I would see if I got any feedback, any pushback that I could turn around and share with all of you. And the crazy part was I didn't. Next time, it'll probably be 50, what I would call warm or lukewarm folks, and then 50 that are cold that I'll be calling. I did it to just see if I could do it. But, I think the best agents are going to be, the agent that you already know, that you're trying to help them grow their business, who's going to be committed to working with it. So like I have a husband and wife that I knew the wife years ago. They moved to Washington. They just moved back. He's now with her on the team. So they're 100%. They're all in on building their real estate business. And They just specifically moved to a new community, and they're very excited about the community. And I just said, hey, have you guys come up with a plan yet to do your hyper-local social farming? And they said, what do you mean, Todd? And then I said, well, here's what I mean. And they're like, that would be awesome. So much so that he called me back yesterday and left me a voicemail. I haven't followed back up, but he was so excited. He didn't want to wait for me to call him. He said, Todd, I know you were supposed to call me, but I'm just so excited. I want to call you and learn more. They're on a huge team. So again, let me kind of talk about it from the side. They're on a huge team. They've got like 100 agents. They're a big Zillow flex team. So Zillow in some markets, I don't know if they're in your market, but in some markets, Zillow doesn't let you be the listing agent anymore and pay them a fee. Instead, like in Phoenix, you can't buy a zip code from Zillow. They give leads to the best teams in town, and they take a 33% referral fee. And so when they get a Zillow lead, if they choose to do that to supplement their business, guess what? They have to use a particular lender. But they just said to me, "Oh, Todd, but we got to use that lender on those leads." And I said, "Well, I understand that." And then I didn't have to ask the next question, because then she said, because they were both on the call on speakerphone, she said, "But Todd, we can direct all of our other business to whomever we want, and we could direct that to you." And I said, "Perfect. That would be my goal. I respect the fact that you have that relationship over here and you have to use them. But certainly in my mind, I'm thinking HOA.com over here and all your other business, your referral business, because you guys are known in the community, that can come to my team." And so just think about who are your best targets, because I promise you, if you called 10 agents and you offered them this solution, you're going to get 10 yeses. I just don't, no one said no to me. And I fished.
You're batting 1,000. You batted 1,000 for HOA.com. Is that correct?
I batted 1,000. And, again, you and I talked about it originally. I thought I was going to talk to all 100 agents about it.
But number one, obviously you had 51 quality conversations. Guys, when was the last time you had 51 quality conversations with real estate agents in a month, let alone in a day? Okay, this is winning by noon. Now, Todd went past noon in this case.
I went past noon. I did track it though. I mean, I could tell you this. I mean, let me flip to it. I mean, yeah, I did, by noon, I had talked to 23 realtors and I had made, looks like 50 calls almost. So, again, what happens is your dialing outbound slows down as you start taking inbound calls. Yeah. And, and again, so it's just one of these things where it's really hard. Like I was super prepped for it, right? Number one, had my list ready, right? Again, this list is really long. And then the last part of it is all listing agents who have done business with my team. So they'll know the team name, but they don't know me personally. And I've got,
those are cold calls, guys. Those are cold calls. Okay.
Yeah, those will be cold calls. I mean, again,
what percentage, Todd, were cold calls, would you say?
I only did about 10, 15 cold calls. And it's funny because I told everyone when I was going to do it, because I had them literally number 50 through 60 were cold calls. Yeah. Number one realtor in the country. Again, I met him once, so I still call it a cold call. Yeah. And the crazy part to me, a couple of things I'll throw out there. Number one is the guy, his name is Dan Keller, who's the one who had done the 100 calls, made 70, or were committed to 100 calls, made 70, whatever. He said the number one thing that surprised him was that realtors told him that nobody's calling him now. We all think that they're getting calls and calls and calls and calls and calls from loan officers that are desperate to make relationship, and they're not. So that was number one. Wow. My top observations were how many realtors had their phones turned off. So literally I called, the company owner of the largest privately held brokerage in town. Phone went to voicemail. Jason Mitchell, number one agent in the country, phone went to voicemail. So it's amazing me how many went to voicemail because they're not in production. But then there was people who I know are in production, their voicemails weren't set up, their voicemails were full, and their phones were off. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? I called the number one agent in Maricopa County, so in the Phoenix area for last year. She's going to close over 200 million. I didn't meet her before. I met her last week, but she didn't know what my phone number was. So I called her and she answered the phone, and because she didn't say, "Hey Todd, I know it's you." She just said, "Hello, it's me." And again, I have a meeting with her to talk about HOA.com to all of her agents, because she said to my team member that had a conversation with her before that she wanted to have all of her agents focusing on farming, that every agent on her team had to have an area they were focused on, right? And so this is a lady who's building a brokerage. And by the way, she's a financial advisor managing $500 million. That's only 25% of her time right now. It used to be 75%. She's like 4 years in the business. It was kind of crazy. The last thing I'll say, which was really funny, I asked her what her number one concern was. When I met her last week, she told me that her number one thing she wanted to talk about was $15 million and above off-market listings. And I'm like, all right, that's totally not my wheelhouse, but yep, we're going to talk about that.
That's fantastic for so many reasons. We've got a question there. What percentage are voicemails are full? And then what are you leaving on their voicemail? So when somebody doesn't answer, what are you saying, Todd?
It depended on who the person was, what I said. So percentage of voicemails full was probably, close to 5% either didn't have it set up or voicemail was full or off. So, I mean, almost 10% of people you could. So those people I had to text, right? So like, there's a lady I texted, one of my cold calls, voicemail was full or off. And I just texted her and said, "Hey, you referred to me. Someone said we should connect." and she hasn't responded yet, by the way. I tried not to do any texting. So I guess that's the other thing I would say real quick, and then I'll answer the question is, and I know we only got 3 minutes, but I tried not to text because I feel like I could easily have a quote unquote quality conversation via text with somebody. And I didn't want to do that. So there was other people on there who were calling, leaving a voicemail, sending an email, and then sending a text. I did send a text to a couple of people when their voicemail was full. Again, my script of the voicemail I left depended on what it was of those 6 things I was talking about. If it was somebody that is connected to me in some way, but not necessarily somebody that I'm targeting to do business with, but they're influencer, and I feel like I can learn something with them that I can turn around and share with all of you, then it might just been, hey, it's Todd Bookspan. Hope all is well. Hey, let's connect before the end of the year. We're long overdue. I'd love to catch up with you. So like I did that with a guy who runs one of the largest EXP networks in the country. He sent me a Facebook message yesterday saying, Todd, I'm hammered between now and the end of the year. Let's talk after the first of the year. So I said, awesome, great. Any date in particular, and I haven't been on social to see, but I'm going to push him to give me a date now to connect. If it was somebody, I didn't really leave much with regards to, maybe I left 1 or 2 with regards to the farming, like, hey, I just know you are super focused on, XYZ farm, XYZ area. I'd love to connect with you about that. And so I just left them a message of whatever I thought it was that would get them to call me back.
Yeah.
And some of it has worked and some of it hasn't. And then I'll call those people back. So like the guy that actually owned the brokerage, I forgot to remind him that he spoke for my Modern Mortgage Summit that I did the last couple of years. And that would have been a great way for him to remember who I am. Because I've never met him face to face, but I just said, gosh, we've got so many friends in common. I really feel like we should connect, which is what I truly believe. And so again, I'm going to continue to follow up with these people, maybe plant some other seeds. Like I'll comment to some of his social stuff this week and then say, hey, I'd really love to connect. It's all kind of plant the seeds for next Monday.
Guys, this is gold, and there's so many ideas here. I love that your partner, Matt Baker, made 78 phone calls and got 4 applications. I don't know how many of you on the phone or on this Zoom call or watching it live or in the recording ended up with 4 applications yesterday. But if you didn't, you need to be making more phone calls. And whether you're offering hyper-local social farming, which, by the way, they haven't heard that term before, but they'll get it and they'll be intrigued and they know that they should be doing that. Just like Todd talked about, #1 agent in all of Phoenix, having every one of their agents, the team leaders, having all of their agents focus on farming in 2023.
Absolutely. And like I said, I'll share those conversations with all of you. I'm going to kind of keep that tight to you. And then, I'm already getting asked to be interviewed about it because obviously people know I put it out there. Last thing I'll say, because you just said it, Brandon, like, did you get 4 applications? And so Matt's like, man, that was amazing. Like, I just remember we're supposed to do it. And one of the things I teach in the ideal week of Win by Noon is that you should be calling realtors every Thursday. And I'm like, well, Matt, yeah, but remember, you're supposed to be calling realtors every Thursday. Yeah. And therefore, when you're calling realtors, so my belief is that, and I know that Matt will do this going forward, and I'll do this going forward, is that really all I'm trying to do over these next 2 more weeks, so 3 weeks total, is set up the cadence of accountability of calling for next year, where for us, our call day is Thursday, protects our weekend. We can know what they're doing. It sets up who we have to follow up with on Monday by being really laser focused on making calls. But I feel like by making the calls now, that I'm just setting up, more connections, more relationships for 2023, which is what I'm super focused on.
Absolutely. And they're starting to think about it. So you can mention HOA.com, hyperlocal social farming. You can talk about the fact that you've got a brand new strategy that you want to talk about to help them create their 2023 plan. And before we close, the last thing I want to do is I want to challenge every one of you to make your 100 calls. Whether it's all 100 in a day or you take 5 days and you make 20 a day by noon and you're winning by noon, make sure that you put them in your planner, create a commitment, email me. I want to hear your commitment. My team will hold you accountable. So email your commitment to brandon@hoa.com. Let me know what you're doing. There you see Todd's.
So there's my planner. So I set it up. First off, I created all the boxes, right? Because the planner actually has 100 boxes in it. And then you can see I had to do my 10 calls down the side. And then, normally there's not as many places for all the conversations, but I actually put a mark here and I put a highlight around it. This was my 50 calls because that was my personal goal. That was a standard I set for myself. And so I was really grateful for the 2 people that answered after 5 o'clock so I could hit my number. I did a line here that was every hour because I was tracking that part, but I got up today. It said dial 100. I mean, that was it.